A wise man once said hindsight is the best sight, and in a post-recessionary credit crisis world, it's almost very good to look at what were the causes and to comment. Now, some of the issues that have been raised is that hedge funds weren't properly regulated, derivatives weren't applied correctly, and of course, the very emotive issue of executive bonuses. What will the role of auditors in all of this? Well, we're going to discuss that issue right now. Joining us on Raising the Bar in Governance is Dr Claudelle von Eck, who's the CEO of the Institute of Internal Auditors in South Africa. Thank you very much for coming through. Now let's just get through the semantics. There's auditing, as I've referred to it right now, and there's internal auditing. What makes them different?
Well, not just auditing, external audit.
Right.
So we refer to external audit and internal audit. External auditors really look at the financial statements. They look at whether the organization is a going concern and really in the interest of the public. Whereas internal auditors are, generally speaking, employees of the organization. They look at every aspect of the organization from a perspective of whether the risks that the organization is facing, whether there are controls in place, whether those controls are adequate, and whether they are being adhered to. And it's literally every aspect, from human resources, finance, marketing, supply chain management, and so forth. Whereas external audit would only focus on the financial side. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about internal auditing post the credit crisis, because what we've seen is corporate margins dwindling. We've seen staff being laid off. We're seeing innovations now in HR practice, for instance, and turnaround strategies abound as companies try to claw back market share. How has the world changed by way of just operational running a corporation?
Absolutely. I think that the key issue is that there are more risks that organizations now need to look at. The volatility in the market means that we need to think faster, move faster. When we talk about innovative, what may be innovative today is stale tomorrow, and a lot of foresight. So really the role of the internal auditor is to continually having the eye on the risk and having a lot of foresight as well, making sure that they look beyond just the borders of the organization, industry and beyond industry, what may impact on the organization. And in terms of the changes now is a greater focus on the risk, and we see it everywhere with organizations, more focus on risk. Let's
just define risk from a micro corporate perspective in South Africa right now, because if you look at it macro, some people say, you know, if you invest in South Africa, you come into that economy, you've got to deal with labor law, you've got to deal with what some see as politicized unions, you've got to deal with issues of black economic empowerment and affirmative action, and all of these will impact on your investment. At a micro level, what is that risk?
Well, at a micro level, really, macro always impacts on micro. You know, if you look at an organization's supply chain, for instance, if your supplier is unable to supply at the level where you need that supplies to be, you may not be able to supply to your customers in turn. You know, so how the market, the market impacts on every single organization from that perspective. What happens on the outside is always going to impact on the inside.
Let's talk about governance issues, because at a macro level, those have been in the spotlight. Presidents, prime ministers, disgusted by the excesses of corporate bonuses as corporates collapse, as people lose their jobs. At an internal level, what are some of the nuances of governance you've got to deal with?
Look, maybe we need to just take a step back and talk about us as a human race. Why are we where we are right now? The greed is basically what is feeding a lot of what's happening within organizations. So internally, the governance issues start with the board, whether the board is really independent or not, whether the board has its focus on the right issues, and where internal audit really comes in, it's the right hand of the audit committee, being the ears and the eyes of the audit committee within the organization. We talk about governance on a global level, micro level. It is really what is happening on a global level is what we are on a micro level.
You've just mentioned the relationship between the board and the executive, and without going into specifics, we do know that that's where some issues have become really tricky, especially as we look at state-owned enterprises, but I'm sure just corporates as they stand, is that there seems to be a disjoint between the fiduciary role of the board and the operational role of management. Post-credit crisis, as issues come under the spotlight, as executives and their performance is appraised by the public, public opinion, and as the role of the boards get questioned, how is that changing, if at all?
I think it is definitely changing. Your shareholders are becoming a lot more aware of the fact that they can't be asleep whilst they've appointed directors. You can't just hand it over. So your shareholders are becoming a lot more active. The spotlight more on them performing, the directors performing, and in turn then your executive team. I think it's becoming a lot more of a hot seat to be a director or even just an executive. And we are starting to wake up to the fact that it is a big responsibility, and that there's a world out there that we're accountable to. And I think we're moving into the era of consciousness, where we're starting to understand that our actions impact on the world, that our actions impact on our immediate world, but there is a ripple effect throughout as well.
All right, Kwebu, just your comments on this one. I mean, I've mentioned what's happening worldwide by way of how we define auditing in the modern day. We've looked at issues of poor financial accounting, we're looking at issues of executive pay and bonuses, and then we're looking at this blurred relationship between the state and the corporate now, where we've seen the state having to bail out many corporates because of bad decisions taken at a micro level. What do you think is going to change fundamentally around governance and issues of auditing as we go forward?
Look, firstly, I'd like to say that post a crisis, you always get an overemphasis on rule making. So lots of people want to put new governance structures into place, and lots of people want to make sure that they can control the system better so that there isn't the eventuality that happened previously. And invariably what happens is a decade beyond that, the rule book needs to be opened up again and potentially get reshifted to a place where business can happen a little bit more efficiently. There's a strange balance between rule making and capitalism, and making sure that the free market finds its own kind of level within the rule making environment, and that has to find a balance. At the moment we are completely focused on rules, and you'll see a balance shift back to that at some point again.
Okay, at the moment we're completely focused on rules, but some people say you need a framework because we've been in a laissez-faire economy where we let industries self-regulate, for instance. So going forward, what sort of framework would the Institute of Internal Auditors start creating to give people the general standards for good practice or best practice?
Okay. When we talk about a framework, we really talk about principles based. These are, because we have very strong standards that internal auditors adhere to. If you understand the principles and the reasons behind why those principles are in place, then I think it is a lot easier for human beings to do the right thing. The minute you start going too rules based, and I agree with you, then it becomes compliance, and people tick box, and they find ways around it. So it's not doing the right thing for the right reasons. It is really just doing the things that the world thinks I should be doing, but behind that I'm doing something else.